She said this was her home too, and she was not leaving. She understood why I left her in that hotel with nothing but her bra, but she wanted to make the marriage work. She'd get counseling and work on her problem. She realized she had a very serious problem. She wouldn't leave, and I couldn't make her legally. This was her home too. If she left, we wouldn't be able to work on the marriage. She'd do anything I asked, and I could just look at her phone laptop anytime. If I wanted her to stop working, she'd quit or take a leave of absence. If I wanted, we could put a location app on her phone so I would know where she was at all times. But this was not necessary because she'd never do anything like this again, but she understood I didn't trust her. Whatever I need to do. She asked me if I had any more questions. I told her why I asked questions. She hadn't been truthful so far, and I knew more than enough already. I told her that if she wanted to do something for me, if she really loved me like she said, she would leave. She said she did love me, and because she loved me, she wasn't going anywhere. We could sort this out and be happy together again. I told her there is no way there's going to be any happiness after all this. She realizes she had a lot of work to do to regain my trust, but she would not be able to do that unless we were in the house together. I didn't think I could throw her out legally. We owned our townhouse together, so I'd ask my lawyer when I met with him tomorrow. I told her it was a mistake for her to stay here, and there was no chance in hell of reconciliation, but if she insisted, she could stay in a guest room, and I wouldn't let her anywhere near me. I told her to respect my space and leave me the hell alone. She then asked for her stuff that she'd been wearing in Santa Fe. I told her the dress, shoes, and panties were on the floor of my bedroom. Her pocketbook was on the dresser. She then got up, went upstairs, and came back with the clothes. She got a trash bag from the kitchen and made a point of shoving her Santa Fe clothes into the bag so that I could see it. She said she never needed clothes like that again. She would dress like that for me and me only. They were from the past, and she was done with the past. She apologized again for hurting me. She would never hurt me again, and she repeated that she loved me. I told her the clothes are trash and you are trash. I went to bed, me in the master bedroom, Ellie in the spare bedroom. At about 2 o'clock in the morning, there was banging on the front door. I went down to see who it was. Ellie was behind me. She was wearing only her panties, and I told her she should put something on. It was Karen carrying an overnight bag. I opened the door and let her in. She dropped the bag and rushed to Ellie. Karen was furious. She started yelling at Ellie, asking how she could do this to her. Karen's husband threw her out. He was divorcing her. She slapped Ellie and grabbed Ellie's hair, pulling her down on the floor. Ellie and Karen started pulling each other's hair, both screaming at each other and rolling around the floor. I thought this was fun, so I watched for a bit. After a while, I pulled Karen and Ellie apart. Karen continued to curse Ellie. Ellie was crying, repeating, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry." Ellie said she had no choice. I made her do it. Karen looked at me and said, "Is that right?" I made Ellie tell her husband. Karen dropped to the floor crying, saying, what was she going to do? He was going to divorce her and ask for full custody of the kids. He threw her out. She had nowhere to go. Ellie got down on the floor beside her, put her arm around her, and tried to comfort her. They were both crying now. Ellie said of course she could stay with us. Hang on a second here. We're divorcing. You and your sister ain't staying with here. Ellie looked at me and I said I wanted them both out of my house. Maybe you could get a place together so they can go sleep with twins together whenever they wanted to. Karen started crying even harder. Ellie said she and Karen were not leaving and her sister had no place to go. It's Ellie's house too. Karen ended up in the other spare bedroom. I saw my attorney the next day. He seemed to know what he was doing. I brought our financial stuff. We owned the townhouse jointly, the 2 cars jointly, a joint brokerage account, and joint checking account as well. Ellie and my income were basically the same. I didn't have any equity in my father's business. I was just an employee. The lawyer said, this looks pretty simple. We'd split everything 50-50 since there were no kids. We would end up selling the townhouse unless one of us could buy the other out. Since our salaries are about the same, there should be no alimony. He told me to get her lawyer's info, and he'd call her lawyer to see what they wanted to do. I told him she's refusing to divorce. He said that wasn't uncommon, but she'd probably come around eventually. They all do. I asked her to leave, but she refuses. He said there was no way to force her to leave. Don't touch her or threaten her. I asked if I could throw out her sister Karen. I explained that Karen had come banging on the door after her husband threw her out. He reiterated that I can't touch her or threaten her. Ellie owned the house too, and I just had to try to convince them both to leave. There isn't a snowball's chance in hell that's going to happen after Santa Fe. I then told him what I had done in Santa Fe, taking her clothes and wallet. He chuckled but told me I shouldn't have done that. Ellie could charge me with unlawful imprisonment, but it was iffy and it would mean her flying back to Santa Fe to file the charges. He said I shouldn't be concerned due to her flying on a plane with a fake ID. Amongst many other things, she has her own issues to deal with. I wasn't worried about Ellie filing charges against me. Buying a ticket and boarding a plane using someone else's ID is a serious crime, and I can prove that's what Ellie did. I'd taken her ticket with her sister's name on it out of Ellie's pants when she got in the shower that last night. It'd be easy to prove what Ellie had done. She could go to jail and she certainly would lose her law license. Karen was also liable since it was her ID, and she participated knowingly. I thought about telling my lawyer that Ellie had used her sister's ID to board a plane, but I thought that an attorney is an officer of the court. I didn't know if he was required to report Ellie and Karen's crimes. I didn't want him to do that now. I'll expose them when the time was right. The first step was to get Ellie to get an attorney so they could begin to hash out a settlement. He also told me to get an STD test. I told him I already had an appointment. I left and told him I would be in touch. I got the test back a few days ago. I was clear. No STD. After I left the attorney's office, I called my dad, told him I was coming by his place. My father occasionally came into work, but I was running his company 99% of the time. With some help from friends, I'd eventually inherit the company. When I got to his house, I told him I was divorcing Ellie and why. He smiled and said, like father, like son. We both know how to pick them. My parents were divorced when I was about 7 years old. I lived with my mom, and when I asked her why dad wasn't living with us anymore, she told me that although she still loved him, my father didn't love her anymore. That's quite a way to put it, Mom. I asked her why not, and she said she had not been a very good wife. My father confirmed to me now that he caught her cheating with a neighbor and divorced her. There was no chance in hell my father would have ever taken a cheater back. Once a cheater, always a cheater. I should understand that dealing with Ellie. I went to work, and when I got home, Ellie was already there. She made dinner, which was unusual for her. We usually got takeout or went out to dinner. Karen was still there helping with dinner. I told them I saw my lawyer and she needs to get one. I asked her again if she would move out and give me some time and space to think about what to do. She said she wasn't leaving. She wanted to work on our marriage and couldn't do that living somewhere else. She didn't need a lawyer. She'll never agree to a divorce. She loved me and couldn't live without me. Karen said that she should have refused to leave her home as well, but her husband was so angry, she thought it was safer to leave. She thought he might hit her. She had never seen him like this. He'd always been gentle and kind. I told her that sleeping with another man might be upsetting to her husband. She should have thought of him and his feelings instead of cheating on him. Karen didn't respond. Ellie and I both worked during the day, so it was just evenings and weekends I had to deal with her and Karen. She and her husband have been talking more. Him yelling at her and her listening to him. She continuously apologizes to him. They had kids, so he couldn't ignore her. Maybe Karen will convince her husband to take her back. That would solve one of my problems. In the meantime, I spent more time at the gym, riding my bike, and hanging out with my friends. Ellie continued to go to the gym, but never on weekends anymore. She also switched her workouts to before work instead of after work. She couldn't be late for work. I guess she wanted to show me that she was no longer having hookups. Otherwise, she was always at home waiting for me with a big smile and dinner, something to show that she wanted to take care of me. The Oscar goes to Ellie for best fake BS on planet Earth. Karen helped with cooking and cleaning mostly. She sat around and waited for her husband to call her. Her husband agreed to let her see the kids' weekend days and evenings. I was always happy when she was out of my house. I continue to press Ellie to get an attorney, and she continues to refuse. I asked my attorney what to do. He said we will draft a settlement agreement and serve her. That might get her moving. He set up to serve her at work. When she came home that night, she said, probably wasn't a good idea to serve her at work, but it didn't matter. She wasn't signing anything. My lawyer told me there's no hurry. Continue to work on her. We didn't want a judge making decisions for us unless that was the only option left. So Ellie, Karen, and I lived together as roommates for now. One Saturday when Karen was with her kids, Ellie showed me some pink panties. She told me she bought them just for me. She modeled them for me wearing only the panties. She said she didn't buy the matching bra because she knew how much I liked her boobs. Did I want to take off the panties to get a better look? I very directly declined. She took them off and tossed them to me. She twirled around and asked me what she could do for me. She'd do anything. I didn't have to do anything, she'd do all the work. Stood attention, saluted, and said she was ready to serve. I looked at her and said, for such a beautiful face and perfect body, You were so ugly inside. Go put some clothes on." She left, but this didn't deter her later. Ellie would come up behind me and hug me from the back. I would tell her to get off me. She was constantly putting her hands on my chest, back, and arms. I told her to stop. That's something she had always done. She was always very touchy. I liked that about her until now. She sat right next to me on the couch when I was watching TV. I told her to stop bothering me. She said she was trying to show me how much she loved me, how much she missed intimacy with me. Couldn't I try a little? Couldn't I just hold her? I told her I'd call one of her boyfriends. Anyway, on Tuesday, Ellie called and said she had a client meeting at 5 p.m. It would probably last 1 hour. There's nothing she could do about it. She didn't want me to think she was going to see some guy, so she called me. She said that when the meeting started, she would call me and put her phone in her purse so I could listen and know she was actually in the meeting. This was a breach of client-attorney privilege, but no one would know, and she wanted to prove that she was completely faithful right now. I told her, "You can go F the entire local football team at the local high school. I don't care what you do anymore." I didn't need anything further from her. Said she would see me around 6:30 p.m., and she told me she loved me. I just hung up on her. I'm sure all of you are speculating what's going on with Karen. I have been alone a couple of times with her since she moved in, but this was the longest we've ever been alone together. I knew there was more than Elliot told me. I thought it might be interesting to find out more about Karen and Ellie's exploits. Karen was cooking in the kitchen, so I joined her. There I said that Ellie told me that I had slept with her unknowingly, while Ellie had slept with Karen's husband also unknowingly. This was never said by Ellie, but Karen didn't know that. Karen looked at me alarmed for a few seconds and said she didn't know what I was talking about. I told her Ellie confessed they both switched boyfriends without the boyfriends knowing throughout high school and college. I said Ellie had also confessed that they also did that with each other's husbands a few times. I said Ellie didn't remember how many times Karen and I slept together. I told Karen not to worry about her husband finding out. I told Ellie she didn't have to tell Karen's husband about the husband trading. Karen turned beet red and glared at me before going back to cutting a carrot. She didn't say anything for a while. I thought she wouldn't answer. Finally, she said it was just a game. No one knew, so no one got hurt. She said they did it because it was risky and made it really exciting, that she and Ellie would switch around and pretend to be each other. I asked her how many times. She said it couldn't be more than a half a dozen times. She thought for a second and said maybe 10 or 12 times at most over the years. She wasn't sure the exact number. I asked how they did it. Karen said Ellie would come by Karen's house or they met at the gym after Ellie got off work. They would switch clothes and Karen would go to my place and spend the night, and Ellie would do the same with Karen's husband. Karen got up early the next morning, got dressed, and when her husband went to work, she drove home. They would then switch clothes again. She looked at me and said, "You guys never knew. Nobody got hurt." I asked when did it stop. She said when she began showing during her first pregnancy. It became obvious who was who after her first child. She changed her hair color and she had more of a mom body except for their faces. She and Ellie weren't interchangeable anymore. I said Ellie said she used to compare notes about the sex with the guys you both slept with. I asked Karen how was I. Karen said I was pretty good but not as good as her husband. I said thanks for telling me. I now told her Ellie had denied all this. I told her Ellie said she and Karen never switched husbands. Did she want to call her husband and tell him, or should I? She now looked like she was going to explode. She said if her husband knows about this, there would be no hope of them staying married. If there was a chance of reconciliation, this would kill it. Please don't do this. I said her husband needs to know the truth. If she wasn't willing to tell him, I certainly would. She asked me to please don't do this. Her marriage wouldn't survive her husband knowing. I said who knows, maybe her husband would appreciate her being honest with him for a change. I again asked you or me. She didn't say anything, so I pulled out my phone. She yelled, "Okay," she'd tell him. It'd be better coming from her. She'd do it first thing in the morning. "Oh no, no, no. We're doing this right now, honey." I looked at her husband's phone number in the contacts and pressed his phone number. The phone started ringing and she said, "Okay, please hang up." I did. She started crying and said she'd tell him now. She got her phone out and called him. She told him that she has something to tell him and he wasn't going to like it. She said she loves him and was so sorry this happened because it was a mistake. Please forgive her. She wants to stay married for their sake and the sake of the kids. Please don't get angry. I thought, how could she even ask him not to get mad? Karen pauses for a bit listening to her husband. She then said that she and Ellie played a game over the years. They switched boyfriends without the boyfriends knowing. They also switched husbands a few times without their husbands knowing as well. I heard him yelling. She continued that she wanted to be completely honest with him. Yes, she had sex with me a few times while Ellie had sex with him. I could hear him yelling, and Karen was crying the hardest that I have ever seen someone cry. When he stopped yelling, Karen told him she knew it was bad, but it was just a few times and they'd stopped it years ago. That she loved him. Please forgive her. She was really crying now. Her head down, her chin almost touching her chest. He evidently hung up because she put her phone in her pocket. She left the kitchen without a word. Karen's husband called me next. He asked how long I've known about this. I wondered if he thought I was part of their game, knowingly sleeping with his wife while letting Ellie sleep with him. I told him I just found out. He asked when it started. I said I don't know for sure, but probably after they got married and Ellie and I started dating seriously. It stopped when Karen started showing with her first child. I asked him what he was going to do. He said this was the last straw. He's going to divorce her and take the kids. He was sorry that he stuck me with his wife, but if she was home, he was so angry he doesn't know what he would do. I said that was okay. I was opening my home to all cheating wives, and he and all are welcome. I thought we were now brothers in arms. If you need to talk, I was available anytime. He said thank you and told me the same. We agreed to keep in touch. Ellie arrived home around 6:30 p.m. and she saw the dinner half prepared and abandoned. She was concerned, was Karen okay? She is supposed to make dinner. I told her Karen was upstairs in her bedroom. She just confessed to her husband that she had sex with me while Ellie had sex with him without bothering to get our knowledge or permission. Ellie turned white. She asked how I found out. I told him Karen told me. I said that Ellie was still not being honest with me. She said she didn't admit it to me because it was so horrible. It ended years ago. She only did it because Karen insisted. I thought, oh, throw your sister under the bus. It's not your fault. You didn't want to do it. Karen made me do it. Ellie asked me to please forgive her. That she loves me. I just went in the living room and turned on the TV. So that's where we are. 10 days after my trip to surprise my wife in Santa Fe. I know many of you will tell me to move out if I can't get her to. I consider that a last resort. Any ideas on how to get these two out of my house and to move this divorce along? That's the end of part 2, everyone. One more part left with a big reveal. Please like and subscribe to the channel. It means so much to the TDG team. Thank you.